Hi folks, Andrew the Fulgor Milano guy here. I've had a couple of requests for this one, and so this video today is going to focus on how to remove your door and access the inner glass of the door in order to clean it. So if I turn on the light here, it's difficult to see, you may not see it. If I get the light correctly, you can see some streaks down on the glass, and that's actually on the inner glass. So this door is composed of 4 panes of glass. It's a cool touch door, so even in self-clean mode, the glass at the outside stays safe to the touch. So you've got 1 pane on the outside, you've got a double pane on the inside of the door, and then there's a floating pane that's in between those inner and outer panes. And so what can happen sometimes is if you're basting your meat on your telescopic rack, or you're taking something out and it drips, it can fall into one of these vents that's here, and these are the air vents, and that's how they keep the glass cool, is by pulling air with a cooling fan that's inside the oven, pulls air between the panes of glass to remove the heat. But you may inadvertently drip something in here, a little bit of grease or something like that, and then the next time you close the door, that grease is going to run down or streak down inside on the inner glass. So I'm not going to talk about or focus on how I clean the glass, but this video is to explain how to access the glass, how to get at it, so that you can clean it and then put the door back together and put the door back on. So I also don't worry about cleaning the glass inside too much, because when you do a self-clean on the oven, this gets cleaned up as well during the self-clean. So I'm only going to focus on the inner pane of glass, how we access it, clean it, put it back together, and then remount the door. So the first thing I'm going to do before I take the door off is I'm going to remove the lower toe kick, because I don't want to do any damage or scratch it or anything like that when I'm trying to get the door off. This range is 4 years old now, so the door might be a little bit of a struggle to get off as things, you know, expand and contract during cooking and self-cleans and things like that, or grease or drips. It can make it more difficult to work the door out of its hinges, out of the hinge pockets. So I'm going to start off by removing the toe kick and getting it out of the way so I don't inadvertently scratch it when I'm trying to remove the door. Again, after years of use, you know, expansion and contraction, self-cleans, grease, drips, whatever, we may have to struggle a little bit with the hinges to get it out of the oven, and so I don't want to have that toe kick in the way or damage it at all. So in this case, we just rotate the top of the toe kick down. There's a couple of spring clips that you can see that go into these little sockets that snap in, and then you got a couple of tabs and slots the toe kick mounts in. Yours, if you have a newer range, may have magnets here instead of the snap-in clips. So I'll set this aside. Over here, and I've got my blanket set up for where we're going to do the work on the door. So now I'm going to remove the door. We'll open it up all the way down flat, and you will see we've got the hinges, 2 of them. They've got these little tabs here, these support tabs, and they're there for 2 reasons. They'll lock the hinges in place when the door is in place, and then also when we're taking the door off, these will engage with the frame of the hinge inside the door to give us some leverage to remove the hinges. So at this point you can see that the door starts to engage those clips we just rotated up. Typically I put my fingers underneath the handle here. It's kind of a nice fulcrum for rotating the door out, and hopefully we'll get lucky and it'll come out nice and easy. And there we go, rotates right out. Now it is very heavy, so do be careful. Again, 4 panes of glass and a lot of metal here. We'll put it over on our workspace. In order to access the inner glass, we're going to need, I'm going to use a Phillips driver. power driver, but you could also just use a standard Phillips screwdriver if you like, if that's all you have around the house. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove these two machine screws, these two machine screws. These are going into the hinge. These are going into some standoffs that are inside. And then we've got some hinges along the bottom that we'll have to remove in order to take this whole section off. So, rotate this around. So we've got several screws down here. We don't have to remove them all. The front of the door is mounted to the hinge here, and then the inner part of the door is mounted to the hinge here. So we're going to remove all of the dark or the black screws off. And these are all like sheet metal screws with a pointy tip. They're a little bit different than other screws we'll see. So make sure that you make note of what screws come from where. Okay. So that's all the ones across the bottom. And as I mentioned before, we have these are the same, also metal screws, and they all have little washers with them. And I guess these are the only machine screws, so you can see it's a tighter thread and doesn't have a point on the end of it. There's only two of those, but they too have a washer, so not too difficult to keep straight, all of the screws. And then we're going to lift this whole inner assembly, and a piece of glass, this inner piece of glass is going to come out with this assembly. We're just going to pull it straight up and off, just like that. And so now we can kind of see, you can see this is the inner part of the glass, or inner part of the door, where we've got some grease built up on it from normal usage. And then this is the floating pane of glass inside that you can see has some grease dripped on it. And it's not on this side, it's on the other side. So now we're going to actually have to remove this pane of glass. So these bolts right here hold it in place, and it's standing off and floating inside the door. Yours might be a little bit different as well. I think the design has changed over the years, and you may find support bars, steel bars, but the concept is the same. A few screws, and you should be able to remove this whole piece of glass. So we'll do that now. And make note of, and at this point you want to be careful too. You don't want to drop your driver on the glass because it is just floating there. So we've got some machine screws here that we're removing. And carefully lift the glass off. And now, so we've got these metal standoffs as well inside. So they might be stuck to the glass here, just whatever on grease. And this is where they go. So they stand the glass off of this frame and allow the pane to float in the middle and allow for good airflow through the entire door. So this is an opportunity as well, if you like. You can clean out little dust or grease and dust buildups if you want with your cloth. So I'm going to go and clean this. You can see now all the grease that's run down here. I'm going to go clean this, and we'll pick up at the point where we're reassembling the glass into the door and the whole door, and then reinstalling it. So I'm back with my glass, all cleaned up. I just used soap and water, a cloth, and then a pot scrubber as well, but not a steel wool or anything like that on the glass. I'm satisfied, happy with that appearance. So we'll put the glass back down on top of the standoffs. I'm going to do is, if I put these bolts in place, it might allow me to easier place the glass into the standoffs. Okay, if you are using a power drill, make sure you've got the torque turned down. Because it doesn't have to be super tight, it just has to be snug. And we'll just reassemble it. The opposite of how we took it apart. We'll drop it straight down over the hinges. You'll see our holes line up nicely. And now we'll replace all the screws. Missing the washer from that one. Make sure we get the washer on. Now we'll put the door back in place. So basically we're going to put the hinges in the slots. You can see there's a little groove right there. That's what we want to engage into the support steel that's on the range. So again, do be careful. The door is heavy, so rest on my foot. I'll grab it on both sides and put the hinges into the slots, and then I'm just going to support it down lower and then work it in. And I want to feel it. You can hear that little click or clunk when it dropped into place. Now I want to test to make sure it's dropped in correctly, and it's not, because what we want to see is this door come down completely flat like it was before. So we'll have to put it back up. We're going to push in at the bottom on both sides. Now it comes down flat, which is what we want to see. Now we can push in the tabs and close the door. And we'll put the toe kick back on. Tabs in the slot. Rotate up, snap into place. I hope you found this video helpful in how to access your inner glass for cleaning. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any additional requests for other types of videos, feel free to leave those requests in the comments.